Hello everyone. Today is Friday the 17th of April and I'm wearing my heart shirt. Big love for all of you. I found it again. Very happy. I love this shirt. So today I am answering a question that came up on the last call, and the question was, how do you stop carrying your past into your future? Very good question. So I thought I'd dedicate this whole video today to answering that question. So like I said on Wednesday, when you are carrying stuff from your past into your future, it's because it's unresolved. You haven't cleared it yet. So any past event that has happened, a breakup, a business collapsing, a health scare, some issue that happened in your past that you can't let go of, or that you keep dragging into where you are now, or it becomes a pattern that keeps replaying, a lot of it has to do with the fact that you never cleared it when it happened. You never processed it when it was going on. So the story of what happened kind of got woven into the identity of who you are, and it became your story. Everybody's very attached to their stories of their lives, and your pain stories are included in that. So when something has gone on that's been really devastating, we tend to hang on to it and incorporate it into being our story. And people don't know who they are outside of their story. So when new people meet you, or you're in a situation where you're having to talk about who you are and your life and how you've gotten to where you are, your story is always going to come up. And sometimes people don't want to let go of that story. And your pain stuff is attached and linked into that story. So, for a lot of people, when a bad event has also happened to them, or maybe not even a bad event, maybe, I don't want to be all dramatic about this, but in a past story, you may like the version of yourself you were in that story. And maybe stuff has happened over the months or the years since that story, and you are in a different place, longing to go back to who you were when that story was happening. So a lot of people, will recreate a similar story in their lives to re-engage that older version of themselves. Guys, your minds are always looking for what is safe and what is predictable. And once you've already lived a story, survived the story, and come through, you know the recipe for moving through that. So sometimes you're going to recreate the same old negative stories because a part of you actually knows how to deal with it. It's comfortable. You've been through it before. Yes, it's comfortable even if pain was involved. You've moved through it before, and there's a predictable outcome. So if you go through that story again, you know what's going to come. It's a familiar feeling for you. So recreating old stories is just sometimes a feeling of familiarity for a lot of people. When you work with me, one of the big things I'll always focus a lot on is your patterning, your childhood patterning, and how it is creating the cycles of behavior as an adult. And sometimes the recreation of the story is not conscious at all. Sometimes the recreation of a past story is an old pattern that is just playing its way again and again and again. And when it's at that stage, it really, really helps to go and work with a coach or work with a therapist that can really help you to unravel and look at and process childhood patterns that are sabotaging you and keeping you stuck where you don't want to be. So a lot of time it is really these subconscious patterns that are keeping you in behaviors, or keep replaying stories from your past that you can't seem to get away from. So it's a bit like that running around with one foot nailed to the floor, that Groundhog Day, where you just keep re-experiencing the same things. You've got to learn a way to pull the nail out so that you can move forward. For anyone who's been through a pain story, the ending of a relationship, a business partner stabbing you in the back and stealing your money, a big health scare, any intense life event, it's going to bring up pain, it's going to bring up discomfort, and we are going to do anything we can to get away from that pain as quickly as we possibly can. So when you're going through stuff, a lot of people are going to find whatever coping mechanism works for them. Maybe you drink, maybe you take drugs, maybe you see a therapist, maybe you go and do a lot of yoga, whatever your coping mechanism was, it really kind of pulled you away from sitting in the pain and processing the grief or the loss. So even though it maybe helped you move through, I don't often see that people gave themselves enough time to properly grieve the loss of what happened. And even though the coping mechanism may have been a short-term solution for you, the reason the story is replaying is because you didn't process it at all. You just kind of bypassed it and you moved straight through it. So, processing is really key to resolving old stories and old patterns and old behaviors so that they don't replay. Now, when you're thinking about something in your past, it's really important to shift how you think about it. Of course, nobody can change your past story, but you can change the way you choose to interpret what happened. Now, one of the things that I love getting people to do is to write their story. If you're struggling with an event, or you can't move past a breakup, or you can't get over a betrayal that happened, I want you to write your story. And not just bullet points, not just summaries. I want you, from the first moment of the event, write it out in as much detail as you possibly can. Because our minds tend to only hang on to parts of the story that make us look good and everybody else look bad. And our minds can sometimes really warp information that's not really what was going on. So when you write the story, you go into a lot of detail. And what I find amazing about story writing is, I know many of you may have heard that amazing quote that goes, "The path isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. You continually come back to things you thought you understood and see deeper truths." And this is what happens when you write the story of an old event, is that you're now seeing it with your eyes now. You're now seeing it through the lens of where you are now. And it's going to allow you to see different stuff from what you would have seen when you were in the event back then. So every kind of time you process the story, you see a little bit of a truth, you see a different perspective, you come at it from a different angle. And that's also going to really help you with the processing. Once you've written your story, an exercise to do that really helps is to separate out fact from fiction. Everybody gets very attached to the fiction of what happened in a bad story. So I'm going to focus on a breakup because it's something most of you can relate to. And we tend to take a breakup and turn it into, it happened because I was unlovable. He left me because I wasn't good enough. She left me because I wasn't strong enough. We tend to make these big sweeping statements about why an event happened in our lives. And we have to go back into the story to separate what was really going on versus the story we're telling ourselves in our heads. So once you've written out your story, go through it again from top to bottom and take sentences and highlight the fact and cross out the fiction. So the fact would be, my boyfriend left me, and the fiction would be anything that comes after the word because. My boyfriend left me because I'm unlovable. My girlfriend left me because I'm not strong enough. Because what happens with a story that we're not willing to let go of is that we get stuck on the fiction side of stuff. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not lovable enough. And that's never the facts of what was actually going on. So when you can also divide the fact from fiction, it really helps your mind to start letting go of the negative emotional attachment you've got to that event. If you are still struggling to see a different side of this event, I'd love you to write the story from that other person's perspective. If your ex or your old business partner or the doctor who helped you through your illness or anyone else that was involved in that event, if they were writing the story, what would it look like from their perspective? So write the story from somebody else's perspective. It's a very interesting exercise to do, because a lot of not letting go means you're not taking responsibility for your part of what happened. And taking responsibility always means having to keep your finger pointed towards yourself. So you can't write a story or try and process stuff when you are dumping and laying blame at the other person's feet and not owning your part of what happened in that story. So taking time to really process your own responsibilities is a very important part of this process. We can always look back at past events and either remember them in a way that causes harm to us, or we can remember those events in a way that aids us or that supports us. So I know everybody rolls their eyes when I say, what is the lesson you learned from the event? But what is the lesson you learned from the event? Because if you can learn who you became as a result of that event happening, that is massive growth. That is evolving. And that is, yes, remembering the event, but not stuck on the pain, emotion attached to the event. It is honoring what that event brought into your life in the terms of a lesson, and who you are now because of that. So you can remember it in a positive way, or you can keep getting stuck in remembering it in a negative way. If you really struggle to do this work on your own, then you need to see a coach or a therapist. This is why we exist. It's to help people process this stuff. So if you can't let go of stuff and it's still plaguing you, then work with someone who can help you understand how to process these events. Guys, undelivered communications are one of the deepest rots we have when we're not processing old events. It's very hard to just sum up a communication at the end of an event happening and draw a neat little line underneath it and think that's it, it's resolved. We are going to process things for a long time, months, sometimes even years. How many of you have got something in your life that happened to you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you're still carrying energy on it because you never cleared it with that person? So apart from writing the story exercise, another exercise you can do is simply listing all of the undelivered communications that you've got in your life related to these events that you seem to not be able to move past. If that person was back in your space today, what would you be saying to them in order for you to let this go? So think about all of those things that you're not saying, write the list up. It's really important. Guys, sometimes, focusing on the past story gives us an excuse to not be moving forward. And, you can have your excuses or you can have your results, but you can't have both. So a lot of people really use their old pain stories as the excuse for why they can't start that new business, why they can't start dating again, why they can't go and have that adventure. Because all of that unknown stuff is scary, for sure. So it's just easy maybe to use your pain story as the excuse for why you don't have the courage to do any of that new stuff. And I'm going to call you all on that bullshit and tell you that it's a cop-out. So get over your excuses. There's amazing stuff waiting for you, and leave those pain stories where they belong. The last thing I want to leave you with is that pain stories drag on and on because we don't do regular check-ins with ourselves. We like sweep everything under the carpet and we carry on with our lives, pretending that stuff isn't still affecting us. So please just do a weekly check-in with yourself. A weekly check-in with yourself around what did not work for me about the way I behaved in my life this week. But what did work for me about the way I behaved in my life this week? Was there anywhere in this week where I violated someone else's boundaries or where someone violated my boundaries? In this week, did I make sure that I was getting my needs met, or was I focused completely on everybody else and not paying attention to myself? So, checking in with yourself every week is a very good way to have that net that just catches all that unworkable sabotaging behavior before it gets the better of you, and to do something about it. And start each week in a clearer space, being very conscious about your behavior. So I hope that's answered that question. I haven't seen any other questions coming up about it. So as always, I'm here if you want more information or more discussion around this question. Let me know, and go and do some work on your stories and your lists and your communications. So sending you lots and lots of love for a beautiful weekend ahead, and I will see you all on Monday at 5 o'clock.